thank you so much for joining me today, particularly given that you've just shared that not only are you living in a very full house at the moment, but you've got a grandchild due today. So I really appreciate you making time. This is an interview in a series that I've been doing for leaders in the family violence space. So I'm really looking forward to hearing some of the things that we've been talking about that I think will be of enormous interest to them. Wil, you were elected as the Assistant Secretary at Victorian Trades Hall Council in 2014.
Yes.
Prior to that, an organiser at the ASU. And prior to that, an associate solicitor at Slater and Gordon.
Yes.
One of the things that I'm really curious about, you have some very significant and impressive campaigning track record under your belt. The Yes campaign for marriage equality, you were the Victorian State Lead on. The Equal Pay campaign that the ASU led that got a significant improvement for women in terms of equal pay in the social services sector, and the We Are Union campaign around the federal election. Those are all campaigns that have had very significant impact on community views and made changes that people weren't at all sure was going to be possible at the time, really pretty groundbreaking and actually I really kind of very, very moving and important, and I thank you for the role that you played in those, because it's made it a better place for us to live in Victoria. Wil, what's your learnings from those campaigns, and particularly kind of speaking to people who are in the family violence sector, thinking about how to work to stop violence against women and children?
Oh, that is a very, very big question, isn't it?
It is.
Maybe the best way to answer that is to talk about how I understand campaigning happens from the campaigning I've done, and then people can draw from that the bits that are useful, because there's a kind of so the first thing I'd say is, for us, I campaign collectively. So campaigns only deliver large-scale change when you can build a sense of common purpose and a sense of collective around that, for a couple of reasons. The first is that you can reach more people, talk to more people, like the more of you that are there in collective, the better you do, but also because campaigning for social change is really hard work, and collective does two things. One is it keeps you honest, so that there is always somebody when you go, this is a great idea, who says, maybe that's not such a great idea, or why are we doing that, or is that actually our purpose? Like, is that where we're going? They keep you honest and grounded. And it also means that in the moments where campaigning is too hard and you are tired, when you've had your 50th conversation with someone on the phone and it's been shit the whole time, there is someone who can step in and either lift you up or just take over, who can just go, you know what, you've done your bit for today, you go, I'll get through the rest of that. So the first thing for me is campaigning is a collective experience, and there are lots of reasons for that. The second is that most of the campaigning I've done has been kind of framed by a core set of questions. So what do we want? When do we want it? Who can give it to us? What's our story? And what's the story that is about both building collective and persuading people? And how are we going to get the story out there? So every campaign I've done essentially begins with those core questions. And actually the hardest of those is, what do we want? Because social change, because what we're about is tangible, measurable, real world change. So for instance, we don't run campaigns that are about changing attitudes, or that are about, like for us, changing attitudes is a step towards a tangible change. So what's the tangible thing? We want to change a law. That means we have to change attitudes to X, Y, and Z. I would describe in my mind, for instance, the refugee campaign as an example where it's been really hard to define the what do we want, which has made building collective quite difficult because, in fact, we don't agree, those of us who want to see Australia do better in that space, we don't agree about what that means in the real world. Like for some, that means open borders. For others, it means close the camps or the offshore detention. For some, it means a regional solution. For others, and because we don't agree, we can't do that. So the what do we want bit is really important, and that's the bit that takes some time. Then the when do we want it, that's about whether there are external timeframes that determine that. So the Yes campaign for marriage, the postal survey campaign, for example, is different to the broad marriage equality campaign. The broad marriage equality campaign didn't have a time frame on it. It just said it'll happen when it happens. The postal survey, we were really clear that we had to do X, Y, and Z by certain dates. So that changes what you do. Who can give it to us is about working out, and that's linked to what do we want, then who can deliver that to us in the real world? Who makes the legislative change or who implements the program or to deliver that change? And then you build collective around the bit for me that is really critical is the story. What is the story that we are telling that is consistent with our values, that we can ask our people to go out with their hearts and tell that is true for them and is a true story, but that is also persuasive to the people that aren't necessarily from that same value set or from the same place as us. So like in the marriage equality campaign, the story was about, people would talk about rights, but in fact, rights isn't a values proposition, right? The right to have this thing, no one really cares about rights, but what they do care about is a sense of, so we would say there are 6 words that you should be saying, and I may not remember all of them, but they were equality and fairness, love and commitment, and so what were the last 2? There are a couple more words in there, but the love and commitment one was interesting, right? Because people would say marriage equality is about love is love. And it was like the people we want to talk to, there's a generation of people for whom love and marriage actually isn't a simple story, right? No. Because there's a generation that got married for reasons other than love, but what they did understand was commitment. So when we did training, we would talk about, you've got to be out talking about equality, you've got to be talking about fairness, you've got to be talking about love and commitment, but don't just love is love has meaning for some generations, but it doesn't for others. So put those 2 things together, and that's a story. And it's also, if we do that consistently with our values, we understand that there are people who don't support marriage equality, for example. That doesn't mean that they're homophobic or that there are lots of reasons, and they're on a journey, and it might be that they come all the way on the journey with us, but they're just not quite ready for the marriage part of the journey. So Nana doesn't have a problem that her grandson, is gay. She accepts her grandson. She accepts her grandson's partner. He comes they have the big family celebrations. It's all great, but marriage is a step for her that goes against something deeply ingrained, which is a religious view or just a set of assumptions. And that doesn't mean that Nana's homophobic. It just means Nana's not quite there yet. And so the story is delivered without judgment. And that's a thing that that's a story that our people who were doing that campaigning could understand. but it's also about appealing to a universal set of concepts around what we believe we want society to look like. And so they're universal values, but we understand that those universal values, there are counter propositions as well. So the example I would always give is you can be a parent who both believes that every child in school should feel safe and be able to be who they are, but at the same time you might be nervous about the Safe Schools program because you don't understand it. And you can have both of those views simultaneously. So we aim to appeal to the value, we talk to the value set that works for the story that we want to give. And then how do we get the story out there for us? I mean, I'm in the union movement. There are a set of tools that we use, which is about face-to-face conversations being incredibly persuasive. So we go out and we do door knocks and we do phone banks and we do kind of markets and community campaigning. That's different for different campaigns, but every campaign I've done has been about activating people to have that, to tell that story to their community. So for instance, during the marriage equality campaign, we went door knocking up and down. Like, we encourage people to talk to their own families and their friends and their neighbours, because a story that they hear from them is more persuasive than, what a million other stories. And the analogy I would draw with that is, okay, so car companies will spend millions of dollars in doing TV ads to sell a car to you. And if you're leaning across your back fence and you see your neighbour's got the car and you go, what do you reckon about the car? And they go, it's a shit box, I hate it. You're not going to buy the car, right? That company has just spent millions of dollars to sell you a story, a picture of what that is. And one conversation with someone that you know and trust can completely reverse that. And so we would say, when you're campaigning, of course, you use a whole lot of tools and media and social media and that kind of thing are ways to do that. But in fact, the most persuasive thing is one person speaking to another person whom they trust, or, who has authenticity. So for me, those are the kind of, so then part of that then is, well, how do we get the story out there? Who's the messenger for the story? So in the pay equity campaign, we're union officials, we're sitting around a room going, well, who do we need to be fronting up that campaign? And we wanted it to be women, because it was a story about women's undervaluation. And, we wanted it young women in particular. And of course we did that thing, whereas unions, you kind of have a whiteboard and you write down the name of everyone who's ever spoken at a rally or something. And it was like, we got to the end of our list and went, it's not a lot of women there, is there? Like, that's interesting. So then part of our strategy was to go out and find women. We'd do meetings and someone would put their hand up and pipe up and we'd go, there we go. There's someone that we can potentially get to speak for us on this, and get that person to be then kind of the person who would speak, in a sense, would be the messenger for your campaign message, apart from all the other people who do it, the kind of everybody who takes your campaign on and commits to it. You need to have some people who represent, if you like, the story of your campaign and why it's important. It's a very long answer, and potentially...
it's a very good answer, Wil, because all of the time you're talking, I was thinking about how I've kind of experienced and been part of each of those campaigns, and those elements are what I observed and connected to, and know that the people around me connected to. And all of them were things that we didn't know whether we were going to win. They were big campaigns. They were big changes, not small things. So that's very helpful.
And the only other thing I'd say about the collective thing is that collectives come up with good ideas for how you campaign. So the equal pay campaign, we used to do a flash mob dance, right? which was very handy because you don't need many people and you can create a spectacle and you can do it outside a politician's office. So what you do is you contact a politician and say, will you meet with our amazing, puppies and kittens community workers? And they would say, no, I can't possibly do that. And we go, that's great. We'll be outside your office on such and such a day. And then we would do do the dance. And that came from one of our delegates who was a member of a dance group and said, I could do this dance and we could teach it. And this is a classic of a trade union, like me, grumpy union official going, oh, dance, oh, God, I'm in the middle of doing all this other stuff and you want me to, we've got to do a dance. And I swear to God, it was the best thing that we did because our people loved it. It was a real pick-me-up. They would do it at the drop of a hat anywhere and they owned it. And so it was a classic of a trade, me, the know-it-all union official who knew nothing really about what was going to work. And, it was Lisa, our secretary, assistant secretary at the time, who came in and said, oh, I want you to do this. And I was just like, oh, God, fantastic. And it was perfect thing to do. So that's the other thing about collectives is that they come up with some really awesome and crazy ideas.
Yeah. Lovely idea. Wil, you've talked quite a bit throughout that in terms of the work that is involved in that kind of high octane kind of pressure, time pressured work at the moment and the type of people and energy it takes to do that. At the moment, we're all kind of experiencing the impact of the pandemic and 2 months of living and working remotely and not being able to connect in. How do you take care of yourself? Again, what are kind of some of the lessons from, and how do you take care of your people? And what are you thinking about that at the moment in terms of managing this process and time?
Oh, this is really hard for us at the moment. Because the people that want to do that kind of work they're very passionate. They draw inspiration from each other. So they're very collectively focused and they're people oriented. Like they are, as an organisation at Trades Hall, for example, we've got something like 70 staff. We have sacrificed, to some extent, we made a conscious decision around not having so many processes, but so that we could be nimble. And so what we do is we have a pretty, it's a lot about how people engage with each other and share ideas, and it's not formal. We don't do necessarily kind of formal meetings where people share concepts. A lot of that happens when someone says that they've done something and other people go, oh my God, that's fantastic. Standing around the coffee machine and we go, oh my God, that's a great idea. And then someone goes and talks to another team about that idea and we do it. So a lot of what we do, a lot of our information sharing is informal. A lot of it is, so for us, this time now is much more about formal processes. You have to build and make the time because you're not standing around the kettle, right? So we are learning to do a lot more of how do we do that in a world where we engage with each other by phone or via the internet. That's how we engage with each other. We can't, it's harder to gauge how people are going in that space. And our people are incredibly hands-on kinds of people, and they're living in a world where now we're having to adapt all of our campaigning to a completely different way of doing it. So it's a complete, it's a massive shift for us. And our people, because they are people who process isn't necessarily the kind of priority for them, they're very good at adapting. They're quite adaptable because they'll go. So for a lot of them, this new tech world and adapting has proven there's been some adrenaline in that. Oh my God, we've got to get this And to be honest, right now as a trade union official, there is a lot for us to be doing. right?
Yes.
Millions of people have
Yes.
lost their jobs. There's a system in place. There's a whole structure. Like this is potentially massive upheaval. What do we as a movement do in that space? There's a lot for us to do, but the tools that we've traditionally used aren't available to us to do it. So what are we going to do, and how do we frame, and how do we build that capacity up really fast? So there's been some adrenaline in it, but it's been, I think, a struggle. And I think part of it for us as well is we're in a beautiful old building. Like, we have the trades hall.
You are.
It's a gorgeous building, and to some extent that anchors the work that we do. We're inside a place and space together that constantly reminds us of what the struggle is. You know, we call it a struggle, the workers' struggle, what that struggle is, what the sacrifices that those who've come before us have made, what is asked of us. That building imbues that work with a level of meaning. Yes. And so now we don't have that to anchor the meaning. So the kind of purpose has to be affirmed in other ways. And that's one of my reflections, has been how much of what we do in terms of our understanding of that common purpose actually just comes from being in that building together. And that's meant that we're now kind of articulating, you know, because we describe ourselves as a movement of workers organising and campaigning for a fairer Victoria. So there's a lot in that, and we understand our place in that to be what's been handed to us and what we hand on. And that's the bit where it's like, we're completely unmoored from that at the moment. So how do we make sure that we are consistently affirming those things with all of us together? How do we affirm that in each other? It's an interesting challenge.
It's a very interesting challenge, Wil. And I think one of the things I'm really observing, talking to lots of people, is that a lot of people, it's unusual that we are all feeling like that at the same time. We are all feeling unmoored, disconnected. The usual talisman that help us know why we're here and how we're connected are not there. But the energy, your point about the adrenaline and energy that that has been there and that we can draw on is very powerful, but it's also exhausting. You can't keep going back to that well. So I think this is it's an ongoing conversation, and I really thank you for your time today, and all the best of luck. I'm really looking forward to hearing about grandchild number
3.
Grandchild
number 3.
Grandchild number 3. I hope it goes really well. Thanks, Wil.
Thank you.